Thank you. When faced with your mortality, would you be proud of what you contributed to the world? Would you be proud of the legacy you left behind for your loved ones? And if blessed to recover and face another day, what would you do differently? These are the questions I asked myself while lying critically ill with COVID-19 the spring of 2020. It was difficult for me to believe that a healthy owner of 12 skilled nursing facilities in Michigan, I was suddenly faced with my own mortality. I want to share with you my personal journey with COVID-19. The day I began feeling ill was the same day as the first positive test in one of our facilities, March 31st. That was the day my life changed. I was substituting as the administrator in one of my facilities. My partner, Kelsey, and I had the heartfelt and conscious decision to have our corporate leadership team members in the building on the front line with our staff, including the two of us. It was trying and extremely difficult time for us, and we were doing our absolute best. We were following all the guidelines presented to us by ACA, CDC, the state, while also navigating the local media during the beginning of the global pandemic. Imagine being under scrutiny as one of the first healthcare facilities in Michigan hit with COVID and then being subjected to the negative press. They weren't kind. All our efforts were devoted to keeping our residents and staff well informed, supported, calm, and most importantly, safe. Well, that afternoon, I began feeling lightheaded. I was functional, but just a little bit out of it, and the feeling didn't go away. So I self-quarantined myself the next day. I had a telehealth visit with my physician and took a COVID-19 test just to be safe. Well, within 4 days, full-blown flu-like symptoms erupted, and the test result was positive. See, I knew the science. I knew the facts. I knew what was already building in my community. But now it was happening to me, a positive diagnosis of COVID-19. My doctor said, based on what he was seeing and hearing from me, I had a mild case without any pre-existing conditions like asthma, heart condition, or high blood pressure. He felt that I would probably feel ill for 2 days and then it would all pass and I can get back in the fight. I was not overweight, nor was I having any respiratory issues. Honestly, I felt like I had a bad case of the flu. Well, on day 10, I woke up feeling especially awful. And I thought to myself, this must be one of those 2 bad days that the doctor was talking about. And for the record, I'm definitely not one of those guys that's afraid to go to the doctor. I continued working that day even though I felt really sick, muscle aches, headache, dizziness, I had a bad cough, my limbs felt like lead, I could barely move. While on a conference call, someone said, "Reg, has your doctor heard you talk? You should call your doctor." So after the call, I went upstairs to the bathroom and I coughed up a chunk of blood and it landed on my counter. It was shaped like a sugar cube. I was fascinated by it. I was like, wow. But then I was horrified by it. So I took a picture of it, sent it to one of my docs, and copied his PA. His PA called me immediately, directing me to go to the emergency room right away. And as I was traveling to the ER, I started having trouble breathing, 10 days after my diagnosis. I arrived at the hospital with a diagnosis of double pneumonia. My nursing home doc, also a physician on staff at the hospital, came to visit me after I settled into the hospital room and said to me, "Reg, I've known you for a long time, so I'm not gonna BS you, man. You're in trouble. But I have a plan to get you through this. Are you in?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And then he got up and walked out of the room. I didn't realize at the time that his mother had just passed of COVID just before I got to the hospital, so he had already seen the impact of the virus. COVID had totally destroyed my lungs. I had never smoked. I now had the lungs of an 80-year-old smoker. I lost 30 pounds in the first 10 days and almost died. There was constant talk of putting me on a ventilator. I was in the fight for my life. When the realization of how sick I was finally hit me, I was devastated. I had to turn to my spiritual strength to get me through this dark place that the illness had brought me to, because I knew I was dealing with a proven deadly virus. But during my hospital stay, I had beautiful fresh flowers daily in my room, and a different family member visited me every day. But after being home, reflecting during my rehab, I realized none of that had happened. See, Michigan had very restrictive visitation rules during the early pandemic, and there definitely were no flowers being delivered to hospital rooms. I'm told I was experiencing COVID brain or COVID fog, which causes hallucinations or paranoia at any point during your illness or recovery. Some patients experience negative paranoia, but I was fortunate to have positive experiences. And at the time, I had never heard of it, so I thought I was losing my mind. My recovery was both physically and psychologically tough. I really thought that when I left the hospital, I would be back to my normal life in a couple of weeks. After my hospital discharge, my body was still suffering COVID. My oxygen levels were low. I couldn't hold a long conversation. My weight was still declining, and weakness and tiredness made going upstairs to bed at the end of the day feel like climbing Mount Everest. My doctor set me down for a reality check at one of my follow-up visits, and he said it will probably take an additional 5 to 6 months for your recovery. And for the first time, he told me that they almost lost me in the hospital due to the severity of my pneumonia. Hearing that was gut-wrenching. I had never been sick for any extended period of time in my life. My emotions were all over the place, from being scared, from being depressed, like why me, from feeling guilty, why did others die and why did I live, to being grateful and being thankful for being alive. My recovery was a long road. And to help myself get through it, I would set goals every day. And one goal came to me while reading a fitness magazine and seeing this picture of a man sitting on a tire with a determined look. For some reason, this picture really spoke to me. And I said to myself, when I get well, I'm going to take a picture just like that. The photo that kept me motivated, and it was one of the things that helped me get through my recovery. It's a cool picture. One of the reasons I'm here today is because of the amazing doctors and caregivers. And because we're in the healthcare field, we know good workers when we see them. My experience gave me a new appreciation for what we do as healthcare providers from the perspective of the patient. One of the doctors in particular, his name was Dr. M. I struggled pronouncing his name, partly because I couldn't talk, but the other reason, he had a very difficult name. So he told me, he said, hey, just call me Dr. M. He was always upbeat, motivating. He always told me I was doing great, and I would get through this. And he visited me daily, and I looked forward to his visits. One evening, the nurse told me that my oxygen level was low, and I may have to go on a ventilator if they can't get it higher. I remember lying there praying, asking God for help, for mercy, for grace. I was so anxious. Later that evening, Dr. M visited me. He told me he had just spoken to my nurse, and he wanted to teach me some breathing exercises to prevent me from going on the ventilator. I followed his instructions. I did the exact exercises exactly as he taught me. They weren't easy, but I was determined to do what was ever necessary to not go on the ventilator. The next morning, my levels were up, sparing me from going on the ventilator. Now, fast forward a few months after my return home from the hospital, I started getting better. And I was telling my primary doctor that I was thankful for him and his staff for saving my life. And I said, especially Dr. M. And my doctor looked confused and said, who is that? I said, I think he's on your staff, or maybe he's on the hospital team. And he said, I know of no doctor that fits that description at this hospital. Now, it may have been COVID brain, or maybe it was a reflection of my inner self that helped me get through it, or maybe it was my guardian angel. I'm just glad he was there for me. I listened, and I followed his directions. In early 2020, COVID-19 came through Southeast Michigan and exploded within my community. My community, Metro Detroit, has a large African American Latino population that was hit especially hard during the early days of the pandemic. I personally lost 28 people that I knew well, that I have cell phone numbers, including loved ones like my aunt, 2 cousins, 4 employees, and not to mention the precious seniors that we care for. Now, as the fall approaches and the holiday season is upon us, I will especially feel the loss of those 28 friends and family members. The city of Detroit had a memorial of all the COVID deaths in 2020 on Belle Isle State Park last year. I too almost died and would have been on that memorial lane. Contracting and almost dying from COVID taught me to see life differently. I'm grateful and appreciative. I'm appreciative of our work more than ever. I better understand how residents rely upon us and how their health challenges impact their lives. We as healthcare workers help become part of the residents' families. And families, not just blood relatives. The doctors, the nurses, the therapists, they became my community. They became my family. I saw this from a different vantage point. I'm grateful for the support system. In one of the toughest periods of our sector, I was battling to stay alive. I wasn't physically or mentally able to work. I went from being on the front line to not even being a spectator. I had to focus on getting well. And that was very hard for me to accept. During my many months of dealing with COVID, which is a journey that I still continue this day, I relied upon my faith, my family, my friends, my work family, the hospital team. Their support gave me the ability to recover and rehabilitate. And lastly, I appreciate sitting still. Most of us, because of the nature of our lives, our work, taking care of our families, and just living day to day, never have the space to rest and see the simplicity of beauty of everyday life. COVID has enabled me to see life in technicolor, a bluer sky, a greener tree, a kinder, more aware me, a deeper love for my God, my family, my friends, my business, the stranger next to me, and the humanity all around me. So now I return to where we started our conversation, to answer my questions. I'm proud of my legacy. I'm living my life differently. Now it's your turn. Thank you, and God bless you for doing all you do.